Those of you who are in the library, you are welcome to join us in the cafeteria. There's plenty of spaces at the tables. Mary Ann said you could join us in the cafeteria. There are plenty of spaces at the tables.
Thanks, we're on our way.
All right, good evening, everyone. I think we'll get started here. Welcome to the Dairy Cooperative School District Budget Meeting, Monday, November 30th. First thing, I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call on our remote connection just to make sure everyone there can hear us and we can hear them. Dr. Dance, if you just want to go through those folks.
Certainly. Gus?
Yes.
And Nick?
Yes, I'm here.
And Dr. Moody?
Here.
And Brian? Brian Myers? Well, I see him, but he's not responding. Jeremy?
Here.
And I think that's everyone that's remote.
For what it's worth, Cliff, I couldn't hear Derek.
That was the scratchiness that I was referring to.
Okay.
So if you want to, it might be easier for you if you listen via the Facebook live stream.
Okay.
It'll be about 5 seconds behind the actual meeting.
Okay, good. We got everyone there. All right, so I know there's at least one power outage that is affecting one person from remoting in, so if we get to the point where more folks go out, we may suspend the meeting. But at this point, we have a quorum and the majority of folks are here, so we'll press on. So I think first is the maintenance. Jeremy has a presentation for us.
Okay, I think Jeremy will
did
be
you
on in a
hear that?
minute, but I just wanted to preface by, at the last budget meeting, we talked about options of bonding some maintenance projects, whether it be roofing or replacing of any HVAC systems. And so I know people had questions for Jeremy with regards to that, so he's online and he's going to give his opinion on the status of the maintenance improvement plan and options to bond.
Turn?
It's your turn.
Okay. So I guess the gist of it, I watched the last budget meeting and some of the questions that were on there regarding the roofing and bonds, whether we should bring them forward. The fact is, right now, the leaks in those roofs are maintained and the roofs are not currently leaking. If these need to be pushed out, they can be. The intent last year was to bring a plan in to do a restoration on roofs that we could. We went and did infrared and nuclear scans on all of the roofs to determine the condition of the roofs and try and get some sort of maintenance improvement plan going forward. The two roofs that are on there, those big numbers in the next 3 years, were roofs that we could not restore. So we put them on there just to give everyone a heads up that this is coming. This is something that will need to be done. It doesn't have to be done right now. It doesn't have to be done in 2 years if they're still maintaining, but they are past their life expectancy and they should be put in some sort of plan. We should know that this is upcoming. So, you know, after that, it's not on the plan yet. It's a few years down the road. We'll see West Runningbrook. We'll see Barca. You know, all of our roofs right now are beyond what is expected of them. So if we feel like we need to push these out a couple years, I think we'll be okay. I looked at the facility study that was also mentioned last week, and it wasn't very clear on the conditions. It was more of a generic study, depending on, it looked into more of what schools they would close or what they would do to move kids around. They had a lot of different factors there, but they didn't dig into the nuts and bolts of the conditions of the HVAC equipment or the roofing. So it wasn't helpful in that sense. I mean, when we did the assessment, we did, like I said, nuclear scans, we drove cores, we looked at the condition of everything top to bottom. So this can be pushed out if it needs to be, but as long as we all have it in the back of our minds that someday we're going to have to face it. Other leaks we have in the district, even today, are onesie, twosie type things that we get a roofing company in. And, we have a lot of roof space to cover, and leaks here and there are common. And we can deal with them as we go. As far as the HVAC goes, I wanted to appropriate some money towards starting some sort of replacement plan. We don't know what that number is yet, so I picked a number to put on there, knowing that I've done it in the past. We know what it costs to do 1 or 2 units, but since we did this assessment over the summer, we have a lot more information now, which we're still getting together, and we're still putting together some sort of plan going forward. If we can do 1 or 2 units a year, the life expectancy of these units is 15 years, 20 if you're lucky. If we, in the meeting I watched, they talk about kicking the maintenance can down the road. A lot of people do it with HVAC equipment. It just keeps running and people don't pay attention to it, but when it fails, it's expensive. We have some units that are double their life expectancy, so we should have some sort of plan going forward and replacing that, or, like I said, going forward in the next few months, I hope to have some sort of detailed plan of, I could tell you the specific unit that we want to replace, but there's so much information on these things, and technology has changed so much since these were installed that I feel like we need to take our time and have a very good plan in place. But I wanted to have some money there for emergencies, and we do have a few units right now that could use that replacement. Does anybody have any questions on those 2 items? If you could hear me.
Jeremy, on
Yeah.
that, on those HVAC units, what kind of timeline do you think you want to look at, just as far as what buildings? I know you want to be more exact at a later point, but I'm feeling still a little vague on what you're proposing on the HVAC units.
I didn't get all that. Sorry.
I'm feeling still a little bit, I know you don't want to be, you can't be exact at this point about the HVAC units, but I'm feeling what you're saying is a little vague. Can you give us some more details as far as what school you might need for next year, or what you're looking at specifically?
I think I got the gist of that. Not yet, I cannot. And it ranges. In the assessment, we know that the McQuay unit at West Runningbrook is going to need replacement shortly. That could be in 3 years, it could be in 2 years, I'm not sure. But that was more money than I thought it was going to be. We have some units that are just ventilators, let's say at Grinnell, that we were able to get running and maintenance, but it's all Rube Goldberg repairs. Those should be replaced. I don't have the specific school as of yet, and I think I will get that to you, but I think I've appropriated $50,000 in there, and that doesn't go very far.
Did you say 50,000?
50,000.
50,000? Okay. All
The
right.
ones we just replaced at West Runningbrook were small units, and that was, I just had it in my, it was 30,000. So
Okay.
yes, it is big at this point, but we have, those are our main maintenance items. It would be roofing and air. We've always got some issue going with all of those systems, and we should always be putting money into those systems if we can. And a lot of them are way past what is expected of them.
Okay. I'm all set on those.
Any other questions for Jeremy on the roofing or the HVAC?
I don't think we have questions on it. I think this conversation last time we met was whether to bond or not, and what conditions do we bond, and there was some discussion of, do we explore a new school that might eliminate the need for a new roof at one school if it's going to be replaced, et cetera. And I think Lynn or someone suggested that that be a conversation in the coming year. So I don't know that we're looking to bond in this session.
Yeah, I mean, the bond issue that I saw, the conversation that needs to be had is a discussion of, do we have enough things to bond that don't potentially include schools that we may decide in 5 years we're going to either close or rebuild or expand upon, and then we're still paying a bond when we're planning to do something else with that school. I just don't think that's a wise expenditure of a bond. So that's where I was going with it. So what I was looking to hear was, do we have enough things to bond that fall outside of the schools that would most likely fall into that category? Because there's a couple of schools that we know, just because of their location or because they're a lot newer, or the middle schools don't fall into that category. So that was the question I had about bonding.
And Jeremy, it sounds like from your assessment, some of these maintenance items aren't urgent enough to warrant having to bond at this moment. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, it's almost impossible to understand what's being said.
Yeah, I think I just got you. Yeah, I don't think there's enough of it to warrant that. You're correct.
Okay, thank you. I think, the discussion that we had previously had, I think that kind of solidifies the thinking at least. And I think the idea going forward is as I think we spoke before, over the summer we had met for our goal setting, and one of the big things we wanted to do was kind of start to plan more long-term, and one of the things that we were able to accomplish was the 5-year budget projection, which is handy. We have a nice roll-up for the past. Mr. Kling helped us with that, and now we have a 5-year template, I guess you could say, that we can kind of model things with. And so the next step was, what do we need for facility-wise? So some of the ideas that have been brought forward are, of course, the SAU building. So that would be something to look at, moving personnel out of there and selling the property. The hurdles in the past with initial planning on that have been, can we house them all in a current building and it still be safe, because they get a lot of traffic, so we have to worry about traffic in the buildings with students. So that's something that I think we'll ask our admin team to look into, how we can feasibly close that building and at least get some at least a minor expense reduction throughout the year. It's not, I don't think it's going to be major, but it's a step forward. And then we've heard of, several people ask about building a new school, which we don't know if we have. We know we have some land in certain places, Dairy Village. We don't know if we have enough land, so one thing would be to, walk those grounds with the town maybe and look at who owns which land, if it's town or school, or if there's other landowners around there that makes that even feasible to even look at. So I think that would be a second part to look at over this next remainder of the year, I guess. But all these, are long term. They wouldn't affect this budget anyway. We've trimmed the maintenance down quite a bit. I don't think we want to trim it anymore, but the long-term planning is really kind of where the next step for the board would be, and then that would lead into bonding if we needed to look at roofing or combine roofing with HVAC for the future, or look at building needs or what have you. Is there any discussion on these topics at the moment that we want to kind of delve into?
I think we just got to be clear on this budget process. You mentioned that we've cut the maintenance budget enough. You got to understand that last year we voted to add 1.5 million in one-time maintenance expenses. That's reflected in this budget. So it really should be a cut this year because that wasn't supposed to be carried forward. So I'm a little concerned that this budget doesn't reflect that 1.5 million in one-time expenses. So this budget is up by more than 0.8%. It's up much more than that because we're including that 1.5 million in one-time expenses in this budget. All perfectly legal and all that. I'm not saying anything crazy is happening, but I think we got to be careful when we say that, we've cut the budget enough on the maintenance side that we really haven't cut it. We had 1.5 million in one-time expenses, so the budget for maintenance is actually up $500,000.
Jane, or Jeremy, I guess, is there anything else with maintenance you wanted to go over?
I know Jeremy's got another topic, but to kind of clarify what Bruce said, what he's talking about is like on your summary sheet, the one-time fiscal disparity aid, the expenditures for that are included within the budget because that was a revenue, so it's all included in your approved budget for 2021. So I think what the point that Bruce is making is that expenditure for the $3 million or the 1.5 for maintenance is included in our 2021 because they are resident approved expenditures. So that's why they have to be in there. But the roofing and the paving that we used from the fiscal disparity, those are not included in the default budget, and that's where they're taken out. So, Bruce and I did talk about it, and because that was the total amount of the approved warrant article, that's why they're included in the first column there. So, and I think Jeremy is going to talk about East Derry.
I don't hear it now, guys, so you're waiting for me to wait.
Yeah.
Okay. I did have one more budget item to talk about. it could be upcoming, and we're not sure, so I just want to get everybody on the same page. We have a requirement from the state to test for TFAS. And this is actually something at East Derry because we're on the well. It's not town water. And the PFASs are a chemical that they use in water repellent or non-stick products. For example, Teflon, paints, waxes, things like that, and it gets into the groundwater and has some side effects to it. There was a court injunction that was probably the last 10 months where we did not have to test for this. We did anyways, just to do our due diligence, and our average is one number over what the state requirement is. And as of September, the governor made it into a state statute, but we had to remediate it if it was over a certain number. So the number for the state is 18. Our average is 19. We're still waiting for fourth quarter results to determine if we need to do anything for this yet. And just to do our homework, before we get information that says we have to do it, we've been working with Second Wind Water Treatment, and they came back today with a number that could be anywhere between $25,000 and $100,000, which is a huge span. Like the cable company when they tell you they're going to be at your house. But there's a few different ways that we can approach it. We're still not sure exactly what we're going to need to do. I'll keep everybody in the loop with that, but I personally feel like we can do it for the lower end of that. But seeing as we're talking budgets, that's something that we may see in the pipeline. The state, in talking to Second Wind, the state may only give us 90 days to do some sort of remediation. I'm not sure how that's possible yet, but again, it's still a work in progress. We don't quite know what's expected from them at this point. And our average might even go down, and we might not have to do anything. So that's how much of an unknown it is right now. What we implement for a solution, there's 3 or 4 ways we can remediate for this stuff. And we're still kind of going back and forth with that, trying to figure out layout of the tank, the well line, and exactly what we want to treat for water. But if anybody has any questions on what it is, we've posted it at East Derry School, and the EPA website has information. Or if anybody has any questions, they can call me or look it up or whatever. But I'll keep everybody in the loop as we move forward. But I can see this as being some sort of expense in the near future. So, and I'm on a delay because I'm listening to you guys on Facebook. So you'll have to give me a minute if you got anything for me or type in the chat, I guess.
Jeremy, when is the fourth quarter test? When are we expecting results for that?
You'll have to give me a minute if you got anything for me or type in the chat, I guess. The fourth quarter test is in December. And the results are fairly quick.
All right, so potentially would we have it for our last budget meeting, scheduled budget meeting anyway, which is the 14th, I believe.
But if they give them 90 days, is it going to be done in this current budget, or would it be for this next year's budget? So it'd be this current budget, yeah.
Which could potentially impact our reserved funds. So Jane, Brenda.
Jeremy, I don't even know if this is a possibility, but I think most of the homes around East Derry School are connected to a community well that is on Sheldon Road. Is it a possibility to connect the school to that? It's actually owned by Pennachuck now. Sorry, owned by Pennachuck now.
I'm just getting all this stuff if you guys still need me to answer them. Yes? I don't know, it could hit this budget year, or it could hit the next one. I'm not sure exactly still what the state is requiring. And I'm not sure about the hooking into the Pennachuck community well. I was just informed of that actually last week. I didn't know if it was a community well or town water or what it was, but I guess that's always an option. Something we could look into and then not have to worry about this sort of stuff, because to be honest with you, it seems like there's always something new with the state and the water supply. So it's just never ending. It's worse than roof leaks.
So I think that we've kind of resolved that if we have to act off of a December water test, it means we have to
It seems like
reserve, get the results done by probably at the end of March, which puts us into our current budget year, but I'd be interested in having a number for both filtration or treatment of the current well and as well as tying into the Pennachuck system. It seems to me that we've had some issues relative to the septic field over at East Derry at one point or another, and relieving, if we tie into the Pennachuck system, it relieves some of the strain on the property. If future expansion of the leach fields have to occur, relieving, not having a well that we're working off of the property gives us more expansion capability on the septic. So I think I'd certainly be interested in that report sooner than later. So that's it.
Yep, I'll keep everybody in the loop.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anything else, maintenance-wise?
Just so you don't have to wait for the delay. I think that was it for maintenance.
Okay, that was the only firm agenda item. After that is just discussion on, I guess, what we've learned. One thing is we got the actual Pinkerton numbers in the interim. They, again, were planned to be with us our last scheduled meeting, so if folks have questions for Pinkerton, we might want to give them a heads up as we do our administration as to what those questions are. People are more than welcome to send them directly to me. I'll send out an email either tonight or tomorrow with that request, and then people can just reply back, and then I'll forward those to Dr. Powers at Pinkerton. So they still have some time to prep for those questions. I know we asked them some questions at our last sending town meeting, but that was before they had finalized their tuition rates. So I think it would be helpful if this group had a chance to formulate some questions for them specifically about their budget, that we could get them to them early enough where they could look at that data and get it back to us when they do their presentation here. But any questions so far, ideas, numbers we want to dive into, any other presentations we want as far as the budget as it stands now?
One question I had that I had asked last time, and I didn't know if we had if it was something we should talk about. Normally in a budget, we will have at least one teacher floater position in case a class gets larger, or, and I don't know how, in the past we've had one, sometimes we've had two, but I think it's something we should at least hear from the administration about, because class sizes vary a lot and we have enough classes that I don't think we should count on having none of those. I couldn't find any in the budget, so I think it's something we need to think about. We can't just count on some classes being smaller, I don't think.
Right. Erica, we did address that at a leadership meeting, looked at the projected numbers for next year. The only area at this time that we would consider, and again, I use that phrase at this time, consider needing a floater for would be grade 4 at South Range School. And I take the current numbers that we have as of, what was last week, and looked again today, would be 24 and 25. We have 2 class sections for grade 4, thus being a total enrollment at this time of 49 students. That's projected for, again, the 21-22 school year. That being said, the school board goal at that level is 25 students, and the state standard can reach 30. So knowing that we are in a place that we are not looking to add money to the budget, but actually decrease, if anything, as a team, we would not suggest adding a placeholder right now. However, with the caveat being the board has always supported us if, in fact, when the time came, to adding a teaching position if and when necessary. So that would be the position we would take currently. Again, allowing the Fiscal Advisory Committee and the board to certainly weigh in on that, seeing it's close.
Marianne, did that analysis use all of the potential homeschool folks that would be returning to classrooms?
That is with the homeschool, the current new homeschool numbers of students being returned to the classrooms. Yes.
Thank you. All right, so that's about 100,000, I think, right, to add a potential placeholder spot. So that's another about 3 cents. Is that right, Jane?
That's correct.
All right. So I don't know if there's any people want to discuss that further, or if we want to go with the admin's recommendation. I know that folks on Zoom have a delay, so feel free to speak up at some point. I know that we're kind of trying to slow it down a little bit on our end so you guys can catch up on your end. But if you have anything, go ahead and let us know.
So Jane, the proposed budget summary shows $1.27 increase in the tax rate, but I thought last budget meeting it was $1.21. Am I misremembering?
Bill's our spreadsheet guru, so I'm going to have him look up the prior one if he has it available with him.
Yeah, it says 131.
Yeah, I think it went down from 131, didn't it?
I don't know.
No?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, so looks like last time it was at 131, and now it's at 127.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
And for a note to people, the summary sheets that we sent out to everybody, any changes that were made are on the back of the sheet, and Bill tries to highlight whatever is a new change so that you can see where we've either had to add to the budget or we've taken the reduction. So obviously, anything in red is a reduction, and anything in black was a addition.
I had a question about Zoom. So obviously this year we're using it a lot, so we have a large subscription to it. What are we counting on? What would we be using Zoom for next year, provided we were in school?
I reduced the budget for Zoom expenditures for next year, so it's not reflected in this budget. But if we did need to use it, we're still using Canvas, which we have a free subscription to. So that's one of the reasons why I did go back to that.
Thank you.
Jane, on the proposed budget summary, it's the table with a lot of the light blue highlighting on it, I guess. The supplies line item is up about $92,000. Is that due to PPE or / COVID expenses that we're looking for next year, or is that something else?
We didn't add any COVID expenditures for next year. So anything in the budget that would be supply-related would be general supplies in our budget. If you just can give me a few minutes, I'll look
Sure.
up and see what they are. Bill might have them more readily. Okay. We can answer you in just a minute.
Thank you.
Cliff, can I follow up with one question? Under the 2200 tab, the technology tab, under the 600 object code, it says in the budget book that we actually added many software subscriptions during remote learning that we want to continue, and that includes, at least in here, it lists Zoom, and it lists a price of $18,000. So what does that $18,000 encompass if you're saying we now would get it free through Canvas?
When I revised my numbers a couple of weeks ago, whenever I came in with the final numbers for the firewall expenditure, that's when I took out the Zoom numbers for that. Some of the things that we added were the full subscriptions to Edmonton, New ZLA. Those are the things that we want to continue for the year. As far as Canvas, there's no cost to the district there. And they're still working on the agreement with Zoom. We would need to move people into using Canvas in order to be able to do that. But I'm hoping that we don't have to do anything to accomplish it next year, other than maybe some very special cases. Did I answer everything else?
So Derek, I think the majority of the funds for supplies, I just went through all of our sections, we cut supplies in a lot of our areas, and I think the increase is due to additional software or increase in cost in software, because that would still be under That's kind of bulked into supplies when you look at the general fund. Yep.
Okay, that shows up in that. All right, thank you. Okay. So we're sitting at $1.27 currently, which is not great, but we kind of knew coming into this year this was a possibility. Are there any other areas the committee wants to look at? I know that a portion of this is related to expansion of the NECC program, and that's causing us to remove some of that money from federal funds, but I think what we're doing is we're putting the more expensive program into federal funds and removing the less expensive version, basically. For moving one NECC program in, which is costlier, or removing the one that's less costlier, so we're taking advantage of those federal funds as best we can. We do need the expansion of NECC because it does save us money in the long term, and that is part of that increase that we're seeing. But are there any other areas we specifically want to look at, people have questions on going forward? I don't know. We can, well, we have another meeting scheduled, I believe, next week, and then the Pinkerton final in 2 weeks. But I think we kind of want to start getting a sense of where we want to go. I think we've gone through a lot of areas that 127 isn't ideal, but it's also, after taking out a lot, 1.3 million, I believe, out of the proposed budget, we're sitting a little over 600,000 above default. Where do we want to go?
Well, the question is, do you think you can sell the budget with a $1.27 tax increase? And that's really what it comes down to.
That's a good question. I think that's, always the important part. I think the one thing that looking at this, there's not many areas to cut more. Go ahead, whoever's out there.
Question, I think that's, always the important.
Speaker may speak.
Looking at this, there's not many areas.
Yeah, Derek, the West Running Brook math program, explain that increase.
Can you say that again, Dr. Moody?
Yeah. Right, the West math program.
Can you see that again, Dr. Moody?
The question was around the West Running Brook math program.
We are at the end of our 6-year initial purchase of Big Ideas. And I think what you're talking about, because it's for both middle schools, of course. Big Ideas is the math program, and we are looking to continue with that. And the contract ended we paid, I think, the first 3 years we paid all of it, a third, and then the last 3 years we didn't have to pay. And now we are back to the need to purchase that again to keep the Big Ideas online access and so forth up to date.
What would Jane, what would the number be if we included the 2 teacher contracts? Because the 127 the 127 is the budget number, but taxpayers aren't really going to look at the number. And I think to people's questions, the number they're really going to look at is whatever the potential number would be with the budget and the 2 contracts. That's the number we should really be talking about that we'd have to sell.
Right, so the teacher contract was over 500,000. So if you have 3 cents for every 100,000, and the ed assistant contract, let me just pull that one up.
So it's 15 for the DEA. and
33,000 for the ed assistant contract.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Sorry, it's $1.43.
That's going to be a hard sell. Say that again? No, the proposed is 600,000 above the default.
The proposed is 55.8 and the default is 55.2.
So if I can explain how default is different from other years. We used to put non-union employee, for example, benefit increases. So the health insurance increase for non-union staff members used to go in default, and you can't do that anymore. So our proposed budgets are typically now always going to be over because there's certain costs that we now can't put into default. So for any staff member who is not in a union, so that would include custodians, secretaries, principals, administration, tech department, any of those employees, our health insurance plans, as we know, we already have a guaranteed maximum rate for next year. The increase from one year over the other, the increase, that portion cannot be in the default. So automatically, whatever the increase on health insurance is automatic going to be an increase over the default budget. So there are certain things, transportation, basically when we talked to Gordon, even on transportation, you can only put in default what voters approved the prior year. So even though for teachers, it's a contract, so the health insurance percentage would be included in default. But for a lot of things that are based on non-union, utilities, we can't put in increases in default. So that's why you're going to see all of our budgets coming in typically over defaults, where in the past we would be under default.
So can you explain that a little bit? So let's say as a scenario, if the budget gets rejected and you're forced to deal with the default budget, what does that mean?
That means that we have to cover utility increases and health insurance increases, and we have to underspend somewhere else within that budget in order to cover those costs.
Right, so I understand that, but do you know where you would have to cut? I mean, my concern is that this budget could in fact get rejected.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't see how you can make additional cuts if the default is what gets approved without cutting into staff. So the question I would have then is, do we look to try to make more cuts in this current budget to bring it closer to the default to increase the likelihood of it being passed? Having said that, I have no idea where to cut.
So we did meet as a leadership team today, the admin in our office, to talk about areas that we could look to cut, and since it was midday and we all were busy with a million other things trying to get done, no updates were included in this budget. So one of the conversations that we had was possibly some of the technology being taken out of this year's budget and not be put into this. So that was a conversation we had that we didn't get to totally delve into, but that is an area where we're going to look at tomorrow to see if we can make some reductions on that and possibly take it out of this year.
Would it be like the firewall or stuff like that that you could potentially get through the additional grant money through the state?
Right. So what we're doing tomorrow, I have to submit the grant for the additional funds, the 10 million pool of funds that they have at the state that we're applying for. So Bill and I are working on that. And, you know, originally we put our Chromebooks in the original CARES grant. So we are rewriting our grant and freeing up that money for next year and from January on. And we can certainly take any technology out of there. And the Chromebooks, anything that was not already budgeted can go into what we're looking at for tomorrow in our grant. So some of the Chromebooks we can't put in there that were already part of our budget. So those can't be reimbursed for. But so the good thing is that we are getting reimbursed. It's over 600,000. We actually got that part already. It's 200 per student. So we received that, and then we are entitled to, I think it's 358,000, somewhere around there, for the original CARES Act. And tomorrow, Bill and I will be submitting for a request for additional funds. So with that being said, we're hoping that there would be really not much of a COVID financial impact on the district coming out of this year. So hopefully we can still retain a decent fund balance that can go towards offsetting the taxes here. We only used a 2.5 million unreserved fund balance as a calculator in here. And as you know, typically we return a little bit more than that. So fortunately, with a lot of work, we're going to try to put in as much as we can tomorrow, and hopefully that we get approved for what we ask for. So that will really help our bottom line for next year. I know it doesn't change the expenditures on here, but it will change the anticipated revenue. And we also we already received the health insurance rebate from Health Trust. So that's not factored in here because it's really not a revenue. It's going to go towards unreserved fund balance for next year, but it's not included in there. And that was, I think, 400,000 that we just received. So I think there's ways you're going to make up for it on your unreserved fund balance end, but you also have to remember that as a revenue source, I've included our full retained fund balance of 1.2 million. So when you're getting to that dollar amount of 127, that's using up all of your retained funds as well. So, but I know that as leadership team, we are still looking at areas where see what we can bring forward, and I know technology was one of them.
I had a question. I noticed that the legal budget has been going up a lot in recent years, and I was just wondering if you could explain it a little, because the proposal for next year was also high, and I know there might be reasons, but I just think I'd like to understand them, because it was a big jump.
Yes, so most years we overexpend our legal funds, and it depends on what year it is, if you're in a negotiating year. So we know that we've only negotiated one-year contracts for both the assistants and the teacher contract. So we know we'll have a negotiating year next year, and I believe that the Pinkerton contract, are you up for negotiations? Is that your next year? So in anticipation that takes time as well, we put it in there. That's certainly an area if you wanted to look at, we could we could look at that, but that was in anticipation of that.
And I wouldn't want to cut anything we needed, but I really just wanted to understand it.
And we do use legal for other things too, for other issues that come about often as a proactive stance and sometimes as a reactive stance in dealing with specific cases that we deal with on a, I would say, sometimes an individual basis and sometimes a continuous basis. And I will leave it at that.
So this year, we can even use, it did take a lot of legal hours to work through all the CARES cases and funding and protocols, and all of that is going to be put into our request tomorrow as part of our reimbursement for this year.
So if we got that back, would that give us the opportunity to reduce next year at all?
No.
Okay.
No, I was just trying to give you some good news that at least I'm going to get reimbursed for some of the expenses.
Jane, is that 400,000 with the health insurance rebate, is that all the district side, or does that still have to be divvied up to the subscribers as well?
Do you mean for Pinkerton as well?
No, the 400,000, the health insurance
sorry.
rebate?
I don't know if Kathy, you've got the total amount for employees, or I think the 400 is net for the district, and then there's a portion that goes to the employees. We just haven't sent that out yet. We just haven't gone through it yet.
Yeah, I don't think we have any other options to include the retained fund in here, because if we didn't, that number would be much higher, obviously. But it took us a few years to build that up, and in 1 year we're gonna get rid of it, and that's, I don't know at this point if we're going to see those kindergarten funds that would help continue to build that fund back up. It's one of those things now, where we sit now, if that bill will even go through, if it will have the support in the new legislature that was elected. So I think it's good that we, don't really keep that in our minds when we're looking at this, but it's discouraging to see that we have to use the entire retained fund next year. Hopefully, we do get extra grant money here and there, and the health insurance rebate and everything else is there at the end of the year. But certainly, if this isn't the ideal situation, it's good that we have it, that we did build that up. But it just goes to show, it's the revenue side that hurts us every year. We cut like crazy every year. We're one of the districts in the very bottom of pupil costs in the state, and yet every year our citizens get punished by the tax rate. So not sure where we go from here, but if there's any other areas where we want to look at to have them bring back to us for potential cuts, then let's we'll take a few seconds here to think about it. Otherwise, I don't know if we have anything else to discuss. We'll take another week to think through things, get some questions in. I'll send out the email about Pinkerton, if you're going to get some questions in to ask Pinkerton, and then we'll move forward from there. So
For the Pinkerton presentation, is it possible to show how, whether it's a 4% increase, how that has a negative impact on our budget process? Because we invited the trustees to come to this budget process, and they've obviously decided not to come. So it would be nice if we could somehow show that, if they increase their budget by 4% every year, and we try to keep our increase to a certain number, how that impacts on the K through 8 budget. But that's extra work for admin to do that.
I think it actually wouldn't be quite as, as difficult as you imagine? Because we have a number right here, the 700, we have a total number here of their increase, which is 1.3 million. So we know, we could figure out, if you took that out or reduced it, how things would change.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest concern is I've heard that certain people rave about Pinkerton, but I know when I've talked to Concord, the one thing they tell me is the Pinkerton is killing us from a budget perspective, so it'd be good to show that, if Pinkerton increases their budget 4% every year, then that means we can't increase our budget by more than 1 or 2% every year in order to keep the tax rate within some manageable increase. And it would be nice if we could just show that. Maybe we go back over the last few years and use those numbers to show that. I don't know. But I know we've cut the number of students we're sending to Pinkerton every year. And in spite of that cut in the number of students, the cost to us is still going up. And I think I submitted a question. That showed, if I get this right, I think the number of students in the K through 8 has decreased by some percentage, and there's been a corresponding decrease in our staff. And if you look at Pinkerton, the number of students has decreased, but yet the staffing is actually increased. And that just doesn't seem to make sense, and that would certainly be a question I would ask on the 18th.
I think it's a good question. That's
another question I would ask that I can think of offhand is I know Pinkerton prides themselves on having 200 different curricula paths, but how many students are present in each one of these curriculum paths? If you've got 1 or 2 students in a particular curriculum, then I don't see that is a cost-effective. I don't see that as cost-effective. So that would be another question I would ask.
Yeah, I think, if you look at it, a lot of surrounding towns from us, they have more math specialists, more reading specialists, and that usually shows up in their admin costs. So their admin costs are always higher than ours
More math specialists.
because we can't afford to have those extra personnel, which if we took a couple $100,000 out of the Pinkerton budget, we could then afford those extra specialists, which would help our middle schoolers be more prepared at Pinkerton. And I imagine they would potentially be more successful. I don't know if there's any way to prove that, but they would certainly be more ready to go into high school. So that would potentially be, something we could use the money for.
Well, I would also advocate that since you're opening up contract negotiations with Pinkerton, I would ask that you try to get a couple of the trustees elected, not appointed, because clearly the trustees that are appointed aren't representing the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's a good attempt, I think, but that's always been a goal. I know, probably decades into going back. The last go-around was my first year on the school board, and we went into those discussions, and basically what was relayed to us was, this is how we do our business. We're a private institution, and no, we're not going to have anyone else on it. The trustees are there to speak for Pinkerton. They just happen to allow the trustees to come from the towns they represent, but they are in no way there to speak for the dairy taxpayers.
Derek, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Derek, after listening to some of the things Bruce just said, this is my 3rd year being on this committee, I agree. The talk around town lately is we put all these pie charts up and we show the public, how much we're trying to cut, and, but one of the things that I think Bruce hit it right on the head. It's about time we show how much of the budget do we have to incur with Pinkerton, at least be upfront with the public, so that it's not always the district that takes the heat when the tax rate goes up. And that's probably why Pinkerton does not want to attend the meetings or let us know what their plans are, I mean, we look at it, we got 8 schools in this district, and they got 1 high school. Okay, when you look at the total population of the number of kids we have to support versus what they're doing, I think, that, when I look at the pie charts that Jane puts out every year, and I've looked at the last couple of years, every year they are going up, exactly what Bruce said. We're cutting back everything except laying off 50, 60 teachers that are whack, and yet the public doesn't understand that because we don't make it clear to them. We look at the warrant and say, well, this is what it is. I think if we're smart enough, we'd get out now and get to the public and show what we're trying to do, what the real problem has been, is we have to compete with Pinkerton when they keep going up. Now, I don't know how the rest of the members feel, but I know I've talked to a few other people on the fiscal committee, whether it's Bruce or Kyle or anybody else. And we all feel the same. Every year we go through this, but somehow we've got to take a stance so that people really know up front, as honestly as we can be, that we're trying to do everything we can for the best education for the students of Derry, but yet we're also up against what Pinkerton's doing. And that would be a plus for us to be as much as we can do right now is to show that. And Bruce, you're right on, okay? We go back and look at, I looked at a couple of them, you're pretty close, and every year they go up, they go up, they go up, okay? So, I mean, that's how I feel after 3 years. I don't mind doing this. It's a good education process for me to see what everybody else has to go through. But let's be honest, okay? We're all sitting here for the same cause, same goal. So, I mean, yeah, he's going to come here and he's going to dance around where he doesn't want to answer questions on the meeting on the 14th, okay? But if not to turn it into a contest of, we're not happy with it, but if we prepare for this and let him know that we're concerned about it, maybe it may change that on that meeting on the 14th. That's how I feel right now.
So Gus,
Thank you.
Gus, in the district letter that was written in the spring for the report, we tried to highlight some of that, so I think we just continue to do that.
Yeah, I think it's important. I've been trying to make more light of the situation in public at our meetings whenever we have discussions with Pinkerton, and try to make things as public as we can in our meetings, and hopefully that gets out there and people start to have that discussion among themselves in the town. But yeah, no, I think I took note of your questions. Anybody else, please send in questions. I'll send out an email again that you can just reply to, and try to get it in within the next day or two, just so that we can give them plenty of time to work out those questions, so that that's not an excuse that we dropped them on to the last second. We'll give them plenty of time to work through the questions, and then we'll see what they have to say. All right, any other discussions this evening or any requests for information for next week?
Just a curiosity question.
Derek?
Go ahead. Dr. Moody?
Derek?
We can hear you.
Derek? Yeah, Derek, Derek, my question is that, might it be advisable to ask Graham what the limits of our authority actually are as it relates to the contract with Pinkerton? And what actions we might take that we're not aware of today.
John, as part of the high school committee, we've talked a great deal about what our options could be and what they aren't. Our eyes were opened in our last negotiation, as Derek said, and as Jane also noted, we have increased the legal budget because we will be doing a Pinkerton negotiation this year, or next year, rather.
So Hooksett sends students to Bow, to Londonderry, to Pembroke, to Pinkerton, and I think there's one other school. Do we know what the costs are to Hooksett? I mean, is it cheaper?
Do you mean the cost to Pinkerton or the cost to the other districts?
There must be a reason why Hooksett sends students to 5 or 6 different schools, and I'm wondering, is it cost effective for them to distribute their kids across that many schools? And if so, given that we send some students to Next, but the rest to Pinkerton, does it make sense to try to send students to other districts as well, if it was allowed? I mean, I have no idea.
So we do have a clause in our contract that allows us to send a percentage of our students to other districts if there's something that they want to study that is not available at Pinkerton, or if there's another reason that they can't be at Pinkerton, or, you know, can't learn at Pinkerton. Hooksett has MOUs with those other districts. Part of the reason is that they live far away from Pinkerton and didn't want to have to make that commute. But there are other reasons that they wanted to have options. I'm not sure how long those MOUs are with the other districts, though. And it's all dependent on the space that's available in those other schools. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I personally like the idea. I just don't know. I worry that if in any particular year, let's just say we had 5 students who wanted to go to Londonderry. Londonderry has a lot of Hooksett students as well. What if they don't have space?
Yep.
You know, it's kind of, it's a gamble, but I think it's, you know, something that's worth exploring.
Did I see someone else on Zoom trying to get the floor?
Derek, I think Dr. Moody had something else he wanted to say.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just hoping we can work on the sound quality for the next meeting.
He's okay. He's just trying to negotiate between the two things.
Thank you, Dr. Moody.
So the state has indicated that there's a revenue shortfall. Do we know if that revenue shortfall is going to impact the funding, either at the municipal or school district level?
I think based off of that letter we got from Caitlin, it didn't seem like it was going to affect next year's budget, although it could the following year, because, right, I mean, if they gave us that letter saying this is what you're going to get, unless something really crazy happened, it'd be hard for them to take it back, I guess.
Yeah, I guess they could always, you never know, but, yeah, I think, yeah,
Yeah, I think, I mean, anything could happen, I guess. but
anything could happen.
Based on the letter that said the adequacy we're going to receive, I mean, again, we had the same thing with the kindergarten funds. They said, this is what you're going to receive, and then they said, no, you're not. So, who knows?
Right,
Okay.
and the amount always changes before before we go to tax rate setting, because they recalculate the number of students that they're using as the multiplier for our adequacy rate, so.
Is there a time, an amount of time a person has to be in the district in order to count on that end of year count that they're going to do to? I'm just thinking, so are you saying that at some point, is it June when they look at numbers again?
Yeah, they'll look at them again in June.
And that's just to validate what they're going to pay us for the next year?
Yes, so they work on the average daily and membership from the prior year. Yep,
Okay.
to calculate the adequacy. So it'll be this year's numbers for next year's adequacy.
So one of our fears right now is losing adequacy because the ADM is down because of the homeschool situation. So if they don't come up with a legislative fix for that, is there a way to say, hey, all you homeschoolers are going to come back next year? Can you come back in May so we can test you and just kind of see where you're at? And now they're in our ADM.
Well, they would have to enroll and attend, so.
Right, but
yeah.
though if they were going to be coming back next year anyway, could we try to get them back in like the last month, just to say, hey, let's welcome you back and, get you ready for next year, kind of get them in here sooner.
It's a good idea. I just think you'd have to, they would have to be enrolled in classes and as to be a legitimate part of our ADM. But I know that when I did talk to the state regarding our homeschool students, because a lot of the business administrators are really concerned about that number, especially with homeschoolers, because we had 92, I think it was 92 additional homeschoolers. And there were also high school homeschoolers, so we're also not getting the adequacy on our high schoolers, which is over and above those 92. So when I talked to Caitlin at the state, at this point, they are not taking into consideration that this was an off year for having additional homeschoolers. So I'm hoping that legislature may change and they will take into consideration, but right now, I can't plan on them changing that.
Jane, also,
that
isn't the ADM prorated, where basically 1/10 represents 1 month? So, for example, with special ed, when we're calculating the ADM, it's based on their compliance for the school year, so it's actually based, it takes into account actual dates of enrollment. I don't know if that's exactly true for the regular portion of the ADM or not. Yeah, okay, it sounds like that is the
Okay.
case. So from May to June, it'd be like
Yeah.
0.1 for every student as opposed to 1.0.
So I guess that won't work.
No,
And-
good thought, though.
I'd also like to make a really important point with regards to adequacy, because the food has been free since we've come back to school, based on the USDA meals grant program that's anticipated to run till the end of the school year, as long as they don't run out of funds. But right now, we're anticipating that. And again, that's for any child in our town, no matter what age they are, little, up to, I think, age 19. So Pinkerton students, while they're remote, they can access our program. Any student at homeschool or a remote learner, access our program. But for parents who normally fill out their free and reduced applications, we're not getting those applications because everybody's able to eat for free or no cost right now. But those free and reduced applications are really important for funding, and because there's a lot of programs in our district that we have that are based on our percentages of free and reduced numbers. And there again, when talking to the state, that was an area that they don't plan on making exceptions for at this time. So we really encourage those families who, if you would have been on free and reduced last year and you needed to reapply, or your financial situation has changed, and if you would have filled out a free and reduced application had the meals not been free right now, we ask if you would please fill out a free and reduced application, and you can send it in to any one of our schools. Also, it's important because if the USDA runs out of funds and they're not supporting the free program, we'll have to flip back into a paying mode. And so if those parents who would really need financial assistance, their application would already be in and reviewed or approved. So it's really important if people could fill out those applications for us.
Derek, I think Gus would like to speak.
So
Gus,
You're on. You're muted, Gus.
Okay, he doesn't have.
We were talking earlier about questioning how we would sell this because it was a large increase, and I just wanted to kind of put it in perspective for people. I've been looking over these numbers. So if you take out the 1.5 million in one-time expenses, then our increase is 1.9 million. But of that 1.9 million, 683,000 is special education expenses that we're incurring to expand NECC and to follow the letter of the law and spend money that we had to take out of IDE Part B. And that includes teachers that we did not add, that we simply now have to fund by our expenses that were funded by someone else before. So in that way, these increases aren't us actually adding staff. And then if you look on the general education side, our second largest, another large place of increase, that increase is basically all due to health insurance and mainly retirement. So I'm not saying it's great that things are up in any way, but I am saying there's a very simple explanation, and it's not that we're spending more, it's about where the money's coming from, and it's cost that's being put down on us. So we're incurring, just in retirement for teachers, $373,000 that's added to us. And then you have another $680,000 that's special education related that has to be moved out of, that either we needed to add, which saves us money, or that has to be moved out of IDEA Part B. So I don't think it's as difficult a sale as we may think, because these aren't things we've added. These are things that have been pushed down to us that are just changing how we had to spend the money anyway.
So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but a lot of people just look at what's the bottom line. And if you tell them the bottom line is $1.21 or $1.27 plus the DEA contract is 15 cents, a lot of people may balk at that. That's all I'm saying.
And I do understand that. I just wanted to point out that we're not really adding things. It's just switching where the funding is coming
Right, and
from.
then in the district letter that got written in the spring, I tried to explain, of the increases in the budget, what costs we had no control over and all that. And I think in the next district letter, we would continue to do that. And I know in the public hearing, people referenced that letter. They saw, it was the first time I realized people actually read it. Because they pointed out some of the concerns that we raised in that letter, and it was highlighted in the public hearing. So I think we just continue to do that, but I think a lot of people just look at the bottom line.
I think you're right, but like you say, keep on message, and I think we'll win the people that we're going to win. Okay. If there's nothing else, I think we'll move to adjourn and get ready for next week. So we'll get working on some questions for the Pinkerton presentation. Everyone scour their books and see if you have any further questions or would like more details on the line items. Go ahead.
Dr. Moody, did you want to speak?
Yes.
We're waiting.
Eric, it's Dr. Moody. Hate to throw a wrench in all of this, but it seems to me that given our current situation, really take back and take a look at the multiple facilities committee reports to look how those are structured right now and how we assign facilities for students. In some ways, somehow to reduce our cost. It's not for the next year, but certainly for the year after. I think there's some good lessons to learn from the report, and maybe a third or fourth look at this, if not.
Thank you, Dr. Moody. I think you were breaking up a little bit, but I think you're saying we should revisit the Facilities Study Committee report and just see if there's areas there we can help use to trim future budgets, which I think is a good idea. We started off the presentation today, or somewhere in the beginning, discussing some options moving forward related to questions people have had about the SAU building and its property, and if there's land available to the district to build a new school, kind of fleshing out some of those details before we move forward on any other studies or anything, just to understand what's feasible. So that is definitely a plan we're hoping to work forward to. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I know it was difficult with, it seems like the weather plays havoc with our remote when we have these issues with the delay. I know there were power outages in town. My wife texted me that our power is back, so I know that at least folks on our south side of town have some power back. But I appreciate everyone coming in if you could and doing remote if you had to. I will take a motion to adjourn. Thank you, sir. All right, folks, we'll see you next week. Thank you.